Video games are an unbiblical waste of time, and no one should play them because they are a sin. If this is you, then strap in, because today's gonna be a wild one for you. So I went to YouTube to see if I could find any other channels who are specifically dedicated to both gaming and faith conversations, but I never actually got around to it because what I did find seemed to be more important. The first 5 videos I looked at were all asking the same question. Is gaming a sin? And you know what? All but one of the videos said yes. Of the 5 videos I watched, one of them said that gaming is a time passer and it would be like calling sports a sin. The 2 others talked about how the Bible says, do not delight in the actions of the non-believers and only align your time with that which is sacred. And then the third one just talked about the situation like he was God, and that the simple fact that he said no means that you shouldn't, which is a completely different situation in its own right, and I don't want to get into that today. Maybe later. The topic of today's video is going to be why I think gaming is okay, because come on, this channel wouldn't exist if I didn't have that position. So we're going to be looking at this from 3 different layers. Defining what their evidence covers, defining what the Bible says in approval of video games, and we're going to throw in a few real-life examples from my life that, while they're not biblical, they are important to this situation. So with all that out of the way, let's get into it. What are they targeting here? Well, they were talking like every video game ever made is exactly the same. And they were pitching it like every video game is the same as Grand Theft Auto. And while I agree with Grand Theft Auto being in the wrong, you can't just expand that to all games. The debatably most anti-Bible game of all time doesn't like the Bible. All video games should be banned. Yeah, that makes sense. What about this game? Sure, it condones violence against the unrighteous, but in certain situations, so does the Bible. I mean, come on. There's literally a Bible video game in the works. And you're gonna call that bad just because it's a video game? Something made with the explicit intent of praising the Lord. Spider-Man specifically stands for my reason as these kind of questions being completely ridiculous. Spider-Man is one of my biggest role models. I grew up watching the Tobey Maguire trilogy and playing Ultimate Spider-Man. In the early 2010s, my family lost someone to very tragic circumstances. I'm not going to get into the specifics right now because that's personal, but that loss is what defines my faith today, because that is what Spider-Man taught me to do. Turn tragedy in your life into your biggest motivator. So they are to say that the life lesson I learned from movies and video games that defines my faith shouldn't be a thing. We're going to move on to number 2 now, because I think it's important to know this isn't just my opinion. Colossians 3:17. Whatever it is you do in words or action, do it all in the name of the Lord, giving thanks to Him. 1 Corinthians 8:9. Be careful that your freedom does not become a stumbling block for the weak. All our actions in life live on a spectrum of good to evil. And in the middle of that is a gray area. And so long as your actions are given to glorify God, it is seen as a net good in God's eyes, so long as it sits from good to neutral. But if your actions lower the net positive of the universe, or however you want to say it, it is seen as a net negative. Going back to the very beginning of the Bible, in the beginning, God created. Those are the first words of the Bible. Our God is a creator first, and video games are a form of creation. To cast them aside as a media just because there are video games that are wrong. And don't get me wrong, there are. It would be like calling listening to music wrong because there are artists who curse. Gonna go over their verses that they used in the videos again. 2 Corinthians 6:14. Do not be yoked together with the unbelievers. For what do righteousness and wickedness have in common? This is a fair point, but if there was no mixing of the two, Jesus would have been pretty lonely. Plus, this verse is talking about idolatry, not doing anything in general with them, hence the use of the phrase be yoked with, and there would never be any more believers. And they also used Psalm 101:3. I will not look with approval on anything that is vile. I hate what is profane, and I will have no part in it. Again, this is referring to the extreme. This is referring to Grand Theft Auto and games of the like. And if the problem is that it's fantasy, look at all the faith-based fantasy we have today. Narnia, Lord of the Rings, to a lesser extent Star Wars. And guess what? Spider-Man. These are all works of believers trying to affect the world with their faith. So, at the very least, this should be an excuse for those pieces of media. But what does that mean about the hundreds of others? Well, to put it bluntly, there's no hard, fast answer. Follow what the Lord tells you. If you get the gut feeling of this is wrong, I shouldn't be doing this, don't do it. If that's not a good enough guide for you, keep in mind the rules of are you hurting someone or yourself in real life by doing it? Does it tempt you to do a definite sin? Is it distracting you from something you are supposed to do? Does it make you mad? And most important of all, is it making your life better for doing it? Or is it making your life worse? Now you'll notice in this video we focused on single player story games. Well, if you're looking for multiplayer games, you're gonna want to check out this video, which is centered specifically on multiplayer games.